everybody. My name is Tom Friedman. I'm president of the Ballard District Council this year, and I live in Sunset Hill. Ballard District Council is a coalition of organizations in the Ballard area, the greater Ballard area, and individuals who are interested in the agenda items that we have. All of you are welcome to come. We'd love to have this turnout at every meeting. Although you'd be overflowing, usually we meet at Sunset Hill Community Association building. Many thanks to the Nordic Museum for allowing us to use this great space tonight. Our meetings are usually, the Ballard District Council usually meets the second Wednesday of the month, except in August. In addition to Nordic Museum, I want to thank the Ballard Rotary, Whittier Heights Community Council, and an anonymous donor who helped us fund some of the expenses for this evening. I want to remind you, please silence or mute your phones so we try not to have disturbances. I'm going to quickly go over the ground rules and guidelines. Each candidate will have an opening statement. We have 10 questions that we will hopefully get through, and a closing statement from each candidate. All those, the opening statement, closing statement, and answers will be limited to 1 minute. It's not a lot of time, we realize, but hopefully it's enough to give you an idea of how candidates stand. In addition to the 1 minute, each candidate has what we're calling an extra minute chip that they can use one time. If they feel like they really need to say more, they will play their extra chip card. And after the main part of the program, the question and answer session, you're invited to stick around if the candidates can and engage them one-on-one for a few minutes. We don't have all evening, but hopefully they can spend a little time and you can ask them that one question you're just dying to find out about. And lastly, please hold your applause until the end. Again, in the interest of time, we're asking you to do that. Okay, now I'm going to introduce our moderator. To paraphrase David Letterman in his new show, our next guest needs no introduction, especially if you've been around Seattle for a while. Jean Godden is a former newspaper columnist. She still writes a column for the West Side Weekly, and she's been a 3-term city council member, so I think that by itself qualifies her to be here. She's co-host of a community radio show called The Bridge on 101.1 FM, and she just has a new book out last February called Citizen Jean. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jean, and she'll get us started.
Well, welcome to all of you, and congratulations to the candidates for taking on a challenging job. It's rather difficult to run for office, and having been through 4 elections, I can tell you that I sympathize, but you will probably look back on this fondly. So take it easy and try and enjoy it. I am going to rotate the questions. We're going to start out with the first one with Jay, and then we'll go with Sergio, and then we'll go through them, because otherwise you would end up with having to answer the question first. I did that when my name was Godden the first time, and it's a little difficult, so I thought I would bury it. We'll start out, please introduce yourselves that 1 minute and tell us why you want to represent the Ballard area.
You got to turn it on.
Great, good evening, everybody. Thank you all so much for coming. This is an amazing turnout. It's really inspirational and really cool. I'm Dr. Jay Foley. I have lived my entire life in North Seattle. I was raised by a single mother, went to Seattle Public Schools, went to the University of Washington, medical school there, and I chose to become a family doctor. After that, I chose to work in North Seattle at the 45th Street Community Clinic, where I worked for 12 years, taking care of folks that have no health insurance, took care of a lot of immigrants, thousands of homeless folks, people that have no health insurance, people that have severe mental health and addiction issues. After that, I started a community health program in Swedish, and then after that, I had the great privilege of running one of our Obamacare health plans across Washington State that helped put 250,000 people on health insurance across Washington. My wife and I have lived in the Phinney Ridge, Fremont area for the last 21 years. We have 2 boys that go to Seattle Public Schools, and I'm running for city council to bring an approach to City Hall that good positions have, which is to listen, look at data, and implement evidence-based solutions, and if they don't work, to change them. Look forward to talking more tonight.
Hello everybody, I'm Sergio Garcia. I live in Phinney Ridge with my wife Maria. I am a police officer in the district. I bring an interesting perspective on what's going on. I deal with these issues on a daily basis, anything from being stuck in traffic for 9 hours a day to addressing the homelessness crisis. I chose to move out here. I chose the city. I didn't come out here for a job. I absolutely adore the city and I adore Ballard. I want to raise a family here. I want my children to go to public schools. And I bring an interesting perspective on how to start addressing some of these issues from a hands-on experience. I'm out on the street for 9 hours a day dealing with these issues.
Hello, I'm John Lisbon. I'm also a Sunset Hill resident. I raised a family here for the past 20 years. And I'm running because I don't feel like the city council has been listening to the residents of Seattle. And as I'm knocking on doors, I consistently hear that over and over again. And I don't feel like they're managing growth in a smart way. My background is I'm an entrepreneur. I started a business 20 years ago and became a very successful digital advertising company. And then I was looking for a way to give back, and I went to the University of Washington Evans School and got a degree there at public administration. And then finally, I started a group called Seattle Fair Growth, and we built a coalition of 29 community groups to appeal the mandatory housing affordability upzones, which are coming to a neighborhood near you really soon. So that's what I've been doing. I've been an entrepreneur and working with our community, and that's what I want to bring those skills to Seattle, to City Hall, so that I can bring your voice to City Hall. Thank you.
Hello, everybody, and thank you very much for coming. Forgive my voice, I'm starting a little bit with a cold here. My name is Kate Martin. I've lived in the district for 33 years. I live on 73rd, just on the other side of 8th. I'm a professional planner and designer, and I'm really interested in policy. And I think we can bring solutions to the challenges we face. Everything I look at looks fixable to me if we just apply the right strategies upstream and downstream to actually fix the problems. Whether it's growth, affordable housing, helping the people the broken people of the crisis out on the streets, I know it's fixable. I'm a small D Democrat, a conservative progressive, and I'm ready to serve. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Terry Rice. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for coming out and engaging in your democratic process. I got into this race because fundamentally we have 20 years at most for us to make immediate and decisive action on climate change. As a city, we're simply not doing enough to address this issue. We need to be looking at the 174-point plan that Portland has done as a model. And we need to look at climate change through the lens of how it impacts our housing policy, how it will help us build more low and middle income housing, what it means for transportation and traffic infrastructure around bike lanes, around dedicated bus lanes. So this is the defining issue of our time, and it touches every policy that is important today. Before I got into the race, I ran a small business for the last 5 years, and I've lived in the Ballard neighborhood now for 6 years, and in Seattle for 12 years. So thank you so much for coming tonight.
Hi, good. Hi, good evening. My name is Dan Strauss. I was born and raised in Ballard. I went to Adams Elementary and Whitman Middle School. I even met the King of Norway at the old Nordic Museum. And again in 2015, dedicating the mural at Bergen Place. My parents are homeowners in this district, and I'm a renter. I'm the candidate that can make sure that I have to keep in mind my parents, homeowners, renters, and the kids younger than me who are looking to move into our city. I'm running for office because I love our community, and together we can build the growth together to build a sustainable, affordable, and equitable city that works for everyone, whether you've been here for 1 year or 40. I've dedicated my life to public service. Before and after college, I joined AmeriCorps and served low-income communities all across the nation. I've got nearly a decade of legislative experience, having worked in the Oregon State and Washington State legislatures. And I've got deep roots in our community. Our community means a lot to me. And I really want to thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight, and I look forward to earning your support.
Hello, my name is Heidi Wills, and I want to say thank you very much for coming out. This is really encouraging to see so many people who care about our city. And in this place of history that we're in, opened about a year ago, it took a lot of people to create the building that we're in, and $50 million of investment. So it's pretty exciting that we're celebrating Old Ballard and New Ballard here at the same time. I've lived in this community for 16 years and in Seattle for over 30. I'm raising children by choice in this community, and I'm running because I want to see a host of improvements for our community. As a small business owner, as a former nonprofit director serving youth, as a civic leader, as a former Seattle City Council member, I can hit the ground running on a whole host of issues that directly impact our quality of life, including basic services, public safety, improving mobility, and more affordable housing. Thank you.
Now we're on to the next question. Given the number of homeless programs and services that Ballard provides, what do you consider to be the largest issues regarding homelessness in Central and Greater Ballard, and how should they be addressed? Sergio, we'll start with you.
So, Hello. So you know, this is an issue I deal with for 9 hours a day, right? And I think the issue here is that we're not addressing the underlying factor, right? I think that the emotions are high right now. We have certain people who we're addressing homelessness as a whole, right? And there are different reasons why people end up on the street. And there's a very fine line to walk in order to address criminal behavior within the homeless community. And there is a fine line to walk to actually provide services that are feasible for people who need the services. I think that right now what we're not doing is we don't have a transitional phase for people, right? I think that we need to prevent people from falling into homelessness. We need to assist people who are in homelessness, and we also need to prevent people from falling back into homelessness, right? So where do you start? You just start, right? I mean, there's a ton of things that need to be addressed. We need better services. We need an intake facility to treat the mentally ill, which we do not have. As of right now, we're taking our mentally ill to the emergency room, and that is not suitable. So there's a ton of things that we need to start addressing.
Well, the city is getting better at dealing with homelessness, apparently, according to their statistics. But in Ballard, and as you know, and it has been reported, homelessness has quadrupled in the last year. So I think it's really just, I mean, we know that homelessness is happening all over the country, and we know it's happening all down the West Coast especially. And it's not just a Seattle problem, but I think when I talk to people, as a resident too, I think we're all in shock because it's happened so fast around here. And Ballard has a lot of the services, of course, so a lot of the homeless issues come here. And I think we really have to look on a regional basis, and we have to make sure that our regional partners are also taking their share of helping the homeless people get back into housing. Thank you.
So nationally, 1% of the population of the United States are homeless. So that's the statistic we need to be dealing with. We can't act like that's not the number. So in our District 6 with 100,000 people, we can assume that we need to be serving 1,000 people with supportive housing. One thing I want to say is that overnight shelters, RVs, cars, safe parking lots, all of those things, all of the international commissions on this problem will tell you that those do not lead to permanent housing. So we need to reel in the things that we're doing that's just spinning our wheels and get down to a really serious triage program, prevention, treatment, harm reduction, and enforcement of the laws that we have. Thank you very much.
As a city, we have a bad habit of treating the symptoms of homelessness, those visible signs, and not doing the harder work to treat the underlying causes. So we have some opportunity in our homelessness response. It starts with upstream diversion. We're helping families stay in the homes they already have. This means that if you have a sick child or a car that won't start and it results in lost wages, we step in that crisis moment to bridge the gap and help you with a rental voucher or a childcare voucher, or a transportation voucher. It's the cost-effective thing to do, and it's the right thing to do. But fundamentally, we'll never make it out of our homelessness crisis if we don't do substantially more today to increase the supply of both low-income housing, low-income public housing, and that middle-income housing, housing for families, teachers, nurses, folks who live and work in these neighborhoods. Those are the pathways that will take us out of homelessness, is when we have enough housing for families to be able to afford to live in the neighborhoods that they work, and when we help families stay in the homes that they already have. Finally, we need long-term supportive housing for folks struggling with mental illness and substance abuse. These are housing units that have case managers and substance abuse managers, mental health counselors. Thank you.
We don't have enough enhanced shelter beds throughout the city. We need to have a place that has 4 walls and a door that locks for everyone who wants to come inside to be able to come inside and be connected to the services that they need. This means that we provide them a safe place to keep their things, to be a couple, to have a pet, so that they can get back on their feet. Right now, we don't have enough of these services in the city. We have a lot of basic shelter beds, and that allows for people, that ensures that people don't die of exposure and that they do have a place to sleep at night. But that also means that they're in an open room facility with people who might have night terrors. They have to get up at 5:30 in the morning. It's not necessarily connected to services. And so we need to make sure that we create a stable place for people to connect with the services that they need to get back on their feet. You're absolutely right, we need to make sure that people don't fall into homelessness, because we know that $300 can prevent somebody from falling into homelessness, while it costs over $3,000 to return them out of homelessness.
We're in a crisis situation, and I think the city needs to treat this like the emergency that it is. I believe the city should no longer condone people sleeping in tents in our public parks and open spaces. We definitely need a place for people to go. Seattle cannot solve homelessness in a silo. We need to engage our regional partners in addressing more affordable housing and supportive services. We need to give people the treatment that they need for mental health, for drug treatment, for job opportunities, for childcare. In order to make these investments, I think we really need to engage the county and the state to be better partners. We are among the worst in the country for a state on what we spend for mental health. We only have 729 mental health beds in the entire state. We need to be doing much better. And I think that this is very hard on the folks living in this situation, and for the residents, small businesses, and first responders around them.
It's nearly impossible to discuss this issue in 1 minute, obviously, and a lot of the things that we need to do have been said. We need to have a massively increased coordination in our regional approach. We need to build more permanent supportive housing, which is housing for people that are chronically, severely, mentally ill, that are unsheltered. It's cost effective, it works, it's expensive, but it's the humane thing to do, it's the ethical thing to do, and it pays for itself, and we do it already here, and we need to do more of it. We need to invest more in shelter beds, and we need to invest in some programs that the police are helping us in working on. The LEAD program, for example, law enforcement assisted diversion. Police find people that are committing low-level crimes that they know well, and they refer them in. There's 24/7 social workers on call to do intake, and these folks, instead of just going through the cycle again, jail, back out on the streets, they can get mental health treatment to address their trauma, housing, addiction, mental health issues. We need to invest more in that. There's also mobile crisis teams, mental health professionals on call working on the front lines with the police and taking care of those folks. We need to invest more in things like that, and of course, affordable housing.
I think it would be helpful if we had people stand up when they're talking so that we know who they are. And we'll start out now with the next one with John. Current zoning in single-family neighborhoods allows one accessory dwelling unit, ADU, per lot. Where are you on the legislation currently being considered by the Seattle City Council that would allow both the ADU and the detached ADU on a 3,200 square foot lot in single-family zones with no requirement for owner occupancy or off-street parking?
Well, thanks for Thanks, Jamie, for that non-controversial question. Appreciate it.
My
Pleasure. Yeah, I'm sure. I thought you said you were gonna take it easy on us, but anyway. I think it's, of course, important that people have the ability to live in place and they have opportunity to build on their lots. And I've met a lot of people, met several people on the trail that had detached units, and they're really proud of it, and they have people who live there, and they're actually giving them lower rents than they could because they have a relationship. And I think that's the crux of the whole thing. We can't take away the ownership requirement completely, because what's going to happen? Developers are going to swoop in. It's going to change single-family zones forever in Seattle, and it's kind of a back-end way of doing that. So that's really the crux of the issue, I think, is that the owner has to be on site, and then they have a relationship with the person who's there, and that's my time. Thank you. Maybe I should get an extra minute.
So the long answer to this question is I put on my website under Kate's ideas. If you look at ADU amendments, I go through it very thoroughly on how I want to address this. So I've been designing backyard cottages and little ADUs for much of my career, and we've been allowed to have these things for about 10 years now. I live on 73rd. I rebuilt my house. I have 8 people living there with me. We're 7 with me, and we're 8 people in a shared home. We don't have any ADUs. The real crux to this is keeping the owner on site. If there were 8 people living in my house without me there, I can tell you that it would be pretty insane. I put other amendments in there that I think make sense, but I feel like what's happening in Seattle right now with all this push for more density and growth, and I'm an old school urbanist, I'm up for that, but right now, what the density means is we're kind of on the menu for global investors and developers, and I'm real tired of that. So this is just another example of us, we are what's for dinner in this scheme. So I ask you to please call your council members and say no to losing the owner occupancy. Everyone should own. That's the best rent control. Thank you.
I support. Good. I support the legislation as it's written today. If we're going to make substantial progress towards our climate goals by creating density, and if we're going to create space for folks who live and work in these communities to stay, if we want to be serious about reducing displacement of folks who are on fixed incomes and help families age in place, we have to do a better job of fitting more folks into our single-family zones. And I would go a bit further and say that there's an opportunity in single-family zoning to introduce duplex and triplex as a good, stable supply of low and middle income housing so that nurses and teachers and the artists who work as baristas can live and work in their communities. And we should do this by pairing it with access to mass transit, with access to safe sidewalks, with access to good crosswalks, so that we can build truly livable communities.
I am in support of accessory and detached accessory dwelling units. I recently had to help a friend who's lived in Ballard for over 30 years move out because the property taxes and deferred maintenance on her house were too high. And I looked at her and I said, why didn't you tell me? I could have built an ADU in your backyard, or DADU in your backyard, and I could have had a place to stay in Ballard, and you could have stayed in Ballard. And that was really, her eyes went wide and said, oh, it was a missed opportunity. And that's why I very much support this type of legislation, because it allows property owners to make money off of their land so that they can stay here in the city. And it allows the main house to remain in place rather than selling to a developer, so if they move to another city, it gets torn down and we lose the neighborhood in the way that it looks today. I do support the owner not having to live on site, simply because it's not clear how it will be enforced. And if a family wants to go jump in their camper van and drive around the West for 6 months, that would mean that they couldn't do that.
I support the legislation, and we need more housing opportunities for people of all incomes in our community. These are people who are currently working in our community, having access to live in a place close to where they work. So that really helps us on a whole host of issues. It minimizes congestion on our roadways, it lowers pollution, it lowers our carbon footprint. It provides more housing stability for folks in our community. Going doorbelling, I met a nurse who lives in a house where the landlady lives in the back, in a backyard cottage. She has moved 5 times before she found her situation. She wants to live close to where she works as a nurse at the 45th Street Clinic in Wallingford. She has a 5-year-old son, and moving is hard on children too. I think we need to provide more housing opportunities in our city.
Yeah, the lack of affordable housing and the increasing cost of being in Seattle is obviously the crux of one of the biggest problems we're facing as a city. There's 15,000 to 17,000 people moving to our city every year. They're not going to stop. Our city has been discovered by the rest of the world, and that's 50 people a day. We have to increase density. The attractive elements of this proposal are that it increases density. It has the potential of allowing homeowners and families to have the money and keep it in the family's pockets if they end up building these cottages and accessory units. It can also allow seniors to age in place. But there's other things we're concerned about also. We need to make sure that folks that want to build these things can afford to do it. I was at a community council meeting last week and someone said, this is a great idea, but how am I going to afford to build one of these things? There's actually ways you can look at it to get creative, to have creative financing to allow that to happen. The concerning things, I agree, the owner occupancy requirement, I'm not sure where that's going to go. I think we do have to be cautious to make sure it doesn't turn into a city that's owned by out-of-area investors. And we'll see what the current council is going to do on this.
So I agree with Jay here. I think it's another very fine line to walk, where we don't want developers or people who own multiple houses to make a business out of this, right? And they don't care about property. As I'm going around now, doorbelling, I am meeting a ton of people who are saying the same thing. This is very expensive, right? I met somebody in particular who said it cost them $200,000. So it's actually the loan that they've got is more expensive than the money they're making out of this affordable housing, right? So there is a place for both, for development and for preserving our neighborhoods, right? I live in a house who my landlord is actually owned for a couple of years and owns multiple houses, right? So I don't necessarily think that the homeowners should live there. I think that we should sit down and have these conversations with the homeowners and ask you folks who own homes, what could we do to make this feasible for you guys? What could we do to provide you guys with the tools that you need to provide people like me, a renter, somebody who just moved here, and more people who are constantly going to move here, how to provide affordable housing for people like me, right? So it's a balance of both.
Next question goes first to Kate. Oh, is it on? Not on. Here. Okay, there now it's on. Kate, this is your question. No. try this one. I don't think so
This one does work.
Is it working? Yes, it is. Ah, this one's working. During your term in office, the next 4 years, what specific transportation-related improvements would you support to improve public transit, traffic, bicycling, and parking in Ballard?
Thank you. I also have this on my website, so if you want more information about that, please check there. Concerning our situation in Ballard, I favor the tunnel solution for the light rail, but I think we have to run it all the way to 85th, so I will be advocating for getting that going all the way up there. I mean, density's supposed to come with some goodies, so let's get them. I'm also suggesting that I have this in my newspaper if you want to read about it. We've looked at this for about 20 years. I'm wondering if it's time that we got a sounder stop over here by the locks. So that would be 12 trains a day that we could catch to maybe get us out of this conundrum that we're in. Right now, I'm also suggesting a beach bus that would be a circulator east-west to take us Golden Gardens, the locks, Green Lake, and possibly out to Lake Washington. I think we need to do that. And I suggest that we put the Burke-Gilman Trail on 17th, which is already a greenway, and Leary Avenue, which is a street that if there ever was one that's screaming for a trail through it, it's that one. So I would suggest that rather than compromise the industrial maritime land along the ship canal, which we should not do. So thank you.
I like this question because the better we are at moving cars off the road and giving people alternatives, the better we're going to be at attaining our climate goals. So I like this question. It has to begin by expediting the building of ST3 by doing things like waiving the permits and permitting process and fees to help Sound Transit get ST3 built faster and at a lower price to taxpayers. But we also need to invest in dedicated bus lanes where Sound Transit won't be serving communities, and in building out the bike master plan so that we have an interconnected network of safe bike lanes to give people options. But really, if we want to get great about moving people around the city, we have to make choosing something other than their vehicle the easy choice. So this means having real-time tracking of all buses available to riders on their smartphone. It means greater frequency of buses, more routes, and it means alternative payment options for riders. It means safe sidewalks, crosswalks that light up, helping people feel comfortable getting to and from their mass transit options.
I've already had the opportunity to work with the Interbay Regional Corridor work group that worked with Representative Tarleton that brings state money to our area, working on transportation projects. This is something that I'm a transportation nerd. Please, this is not going to be enough time for me to speak on it, but what I can tell you is that bus-only lanes allow for frequency and efficiency that mirror light rail. And we cannot wait 16 years to have efficient and reliable transit on our streets. We can have the Rapid Ride is intended to be a bus rapid transit service. It doesn't quite make it there because it gets pinch points and it doesn't have dedicated lanes throughout the entire route. If it did, it could have the same or similar efficiency as light rail. And we can have that for the 44, we can have that for the 40. We don't have to wait to be able to go to your bus stop, the bus will come within 10 minutes and you won't get stuck in traffic going where you want to. I can say that Kate was right. The BNSF land that's right by the bridge is still zoned as terminal for BNSF. That's how much I know about it. And we need new services and we need efficient services today.
We need to provide people with multimodal transportation choices in order to increase mobility in our community. With Sound Transit, I favor the tunnel option, and thinking long term, I think that we need to extend Sound Transit from Ballard to the University District with stops in Fremont and Wallingford. I do think we have to think ahead as a community. With buses, we need to prioritize public transit. And we are paying for additional service hours with the Seattle Transportation Benefit District that Metro is unable, they're telling us, to fulfill. With not enough drivers, not enough buses, we really need an advocate in City Hall to press Metro, to deliver people what they're paying for. We need the additional bus service. By the time the 28 comes down to Fremont, sometimes it's too full and it just keeps on passing by. We also need more pedestrian and bicycle facilities. Our sidewalks are aging, our potholes are dangerous.
Check. The search for the working microphones. Again, just to put it into context why this is important. Again, remember we have over 1,000 people moving to Seattle every month. We have the 6th worst traffic in the country, and we have a problem called climate change that unfortunately we can feel the effects almost every day at certain times of the year, like today. It's pretty scary. This is why we need to do these things. Absolutely more buses, absolutely more bus lines, more bus-only lanes. We need to embrace the bicycle master plan. I suggest anyone look at it if you haven't. It's a very excellent overview of exactly where we need to be as a city, with also pursuing the Vision Zero situation, Vision Zero motto, which is no bicycle or pedestrian deaths in the city, which is very doable. And everyone's going to try to promise to do this. If any of you don't know, the Ballard light rail is scheduled to be here in 2035. So we're all going to try. We're all going to say we're going to try to expedite that. Hopefully that'll happen, but it's going to be nice when it's there.
The answer here is public transportation, right? If you look at all the major cities around the world or in the country, it revolves around public transportation. We didn't get this right 30 years ago, we need to get it right now, right? And the longer we wait, the more expensive it gets. At the same time, I am for bike lanes, but you cannot sacrifice vehicular traffic because it does affect people of color, right? Perfect example is my mother. I would love for her to move out here. Unfortunately, she's slightly overweight, 2 bad knees, and she cleans offices for a living, so I can't tell her to get on a bicycle, put her cleaning equipment, and ride downtown on a rainy and cold day, uphill, by the way, right? So it's not realistic, right? So we need more bus services. We need to evaluate the traffic cycles. I'm stuck in traffic for 9 hours a day, right, during the shift. 22 and Market, I mean, that intersection is a disaster, right? How about starting off with evaluation of the cycles, and how about fixing the potholes, right? I think there's a ton of things that we can do that are very inexpensive to start addressing these traffic concerns.
It's obvious that we do need more public transportation, but as an entrepreneur and somebody who built a business, we also have to pay for it. And I think that comes down to priorities. And when the city is building a central connector streetcar downtown for over the next 10 years to be about $450 million, I mean, that money can be used to pay for more bus service. So it's really about priorities and how we spend money. We have a lot of difficult choices to make in Seattle because we are, surrounded by 2 bodies of water, and more people are coming here. So we definitely need bike lanes. We definitely need the bike master plan. But a lot of people I talk to also are saying, but in the meantime, how do I get around? I still need my car. So we also have to accommodate cars in the meantime as we transition to a non-car city.
Next question. Next question goes to Gary.
Sorry about that.
Gary, you're going to be answering our first question. I must say that this is very refreshing. I don't think I've ever been to any forum where we didn't have a certain amount of electrical problems, but it just made me feel really familiar. I remember one time they only had one microphone and there were a bunch of us candidates, and finally we were throwing them back and forth and they were wired, and I thought I was going to be strangling 5 guys. Terry, this is your question. About 3 years ago, the city discontinued support for the 13 district councils, which had been a central source of information to and from the city for neighborhoods for about 30 years. What would you do during your term to improve city interaction with District 6 neighborhoods? Please tell us.
Thank you. And we're hanging in there with the microphones. It's okay. We need to return to the district councils. We need to return to giving that voice to folks in their neighborhoods. City government cannot be a top-down apparatus, right? These have to begin with community conversations. It doesn't mean that everyone in the neighborhood is going to get what they want, but it does mean that everyone should get to have a voice in the process. And as a city council member, it's our job to find you where you are and make it easy for you to talk about what's important to you. It shouldn't be that you have to go downtown at rush hour and stand in line for an hour and a half in order to get your 2 minutes of comment. Your city council member should see you at your metro station, at your new light rail station, at the improved rapid transit bus stops that are going to be throughout the city, on those safe sidewalks and crosswalks that we're talking about building, and in your parks that are clean and safe. You should see your city council member in those places so that you can share what's important to you.
I had the opportunity to serve on Ballard District Council when we still got to meet at the Ballard Library. Was an executive decision to discontinue the program. And this is one of those things, why I was the first candidate to commit to bringing a district office to Ballard and to the district. Because I know the importance of meeting people where we are, and why I prioritize constituent services so that if you get stuck in the gridlock of city bureaucracy, my office will be there to help you through it, to get solutions, because I've got your back. And that is so the fact that the district council doesn't exist anymore is exactly why I want to have a district office, so that I can be here in community, because our district representatives now have the task of bringing your voice to City Hall. I would also absolutely make sure that you're able to use the Ballard Library room for your meetings.
Dan did say it first, but I want to concur and say that I think it's really important that representatives get outside the echo chamber that is City Hall and talk to people where they live and where they work. I think that's why districting passed by over 64% in the city of Seattle. I think people want more of a voice in issues impacting their quality of life. I think that it's really important that folks who don't have the time or wherewithal to go downtown to testify at a hearing have a whole variety of ways of making sure their voices and their concerns are heard. And that's digital platforms, but also through a district office in District 6. So that's something that I would commit to if honored by the district to be your representative.
Test.
It's like a skit. Catch me in there. So I guess we'll probably never know the answer to this question. But the question I had was, what problem were we trying to solve by getting rid of the neighborhood councils? I've knocked on over 1,300 of your doors. If I haven't got there yet, you'll see me. We're going to knock on as many as we can. And a lot of people say, why don't we have neighborhood councils? Of course, we need to have district offices throughout the city. Elected representatives for our representative government need to be accessible and in the communities. So if that's what our neighborhoods of this district want, then we gotta bring it back.
So I wasn't the first one to say that we needed an office here in the district, but for the past 2 years, if you guys follow me on social media, I was saying this as I was the first person who was knocking on your doors and petting your dogs before this became political, right? So to a certain extent, I was the first one to go out there and reach out, right? And what I can tell you is that I go to calls for, hey, somebody rear-ended me, and that conversation leads to, I am so upset with what's going on politically here, right? So what we're missing is a voice. We're missing representation, and district councils is the best thing that we could possibly ask for. Every neighborhood in Seattle is completely different than the other, right? And the issues just within the district of District 6, Phinney Ridge is completely different than Ballard. Ballard is completely different than Fremont. So if you take that, you take a step back and you compare North Seattle to South Seattle, it's night and day, right? So I am a huge advocate towards us as communities to start asking what we want and how is it applicable for us and how is it going to affect us as neighborhoods, because we're completely different.
Well, first of all, we still have the district councils. It's just that they were defunded by the Murray administration. I think the funding was like $500 a month or something, so it's not a significant amount of money. But I was at a meeting recently and was listening to the director of neighborhoods, and he's saying all the right things, that we need as a city to listen to people first. And in the process, we need to make our decisions earlier on. We need to get neighborhoods into our decision-making process. And that's what I've been saying all along. But then I asked him, so what about the neighborhood councils? Are you going to bring them back? And he said, no, we're not really thinking about that. So I was a little upset with that answer, and yeah. But anyway, I support neighborhood councils. That's one of the reasons that I helped with Seattle Fair Growth. We built a coalition of 29 community neighborhood groups to appeal MHA's environmental impact study, because to give those neighborhoods a voice in their communities, so that's really important.
Yes, I'd certainly like to re-empower the neighborhoods. It seems like downtown did not get the memo that we changed to district elections because we want to have a powerful district representation. It started back in the Nichols administration and it just went off and went off. What was I'm from a little bit farther east, so I was in the Northwest District Council, and I've been on community councils, district councils, and served on committees and done all that work, and I loved every minute of it. And for us to be punished because we didn't have the right people at the meetings, it's up to all of us to go to a meeting. It's not up to us to say, oh, we didn't have this kind of person and that kind of person at the meeting. That's just not right. When I listened to the new Department of Neighborhoods head talk to the Ballard District Council a couple of months ago, he was speaking in terms of identity groups, not neighborhoods. So it's not really the Department of Neighborhoods that they have going down there, it's just a Department of Identity Groups. So I'd like to get back to actually having it be district and neighborhood. Thank you.
Next question. Do we have 140? Next question goes to Dan. Dan, during your term in the next few years, how would you improve public safety and police service in Ballard? And what do you think are the biggest obstacles to doing so?
Absolutely. And so one of the things that I've already spoken about tonight is providing everyone who wants to come inside the opportunity to do so with 4 walls and a door that locks to access the services that they need. Because right now it is very difficult to tell who is living on the streets by choice because they don't have the ability to come inside, and who are simply living there because they want to engage in criminal activity. One of the programs that has already been discussed tonight, which only last fall came to the North Precinct, which is Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion. This is a program that really is able to use our law enforcement officers to connect people to the services that they need so that they are not consistently reoffending and creating problems. I myself have had property crime. I've had people hallucinating while yelling at me while I'm watering my plants. This is something that's very personal to me.
The city of Seattle has a relatively small police force for a city our size. In fact, New York City has twice as many officers per capita than we do. And property crime is often a crime of opportunity. We need more officers, and what we've budgeted for, we are already at over 130 vacancies out of a police force of 1,400 people. That's almost 10% vacancies. So the police department is stretched really thin. I think we need to prioritize our first responders. And I think public safety is a core service of municipal government, and if it's not being provided, it's felt by residents, small businesses, I think it's terribly important that it be addressed. Also with repeat offenders, our BIA, the Ballard Alliance, helped commission the study that found we need to be dealing with the folks who are repeating their property crime histories.
Getting more work out here. Again, very difficult and challenging to address this in 1 minute. Clearly, the homelessness issue has a lot to do with mental health resources, the lack of adequate behavioral health resources. Obviously, we know we need across the country more behavioral health resources. We don't even have people that, we still have people who don't have medical health coverage in our country, which is incredible. I'll tell you, last week though, I got to do a ride-along downtown in Pioneer Square at night with one of my friend's daughters. She's 37 years old. Lexi grew up in Wallingford, and she wants to help people and she wants to serve our city, and she's a cop. And I'll tell you, the biggest problem that she identifies is morale. She said it is so hard to get people to stay here and work here. We're understaffed, we're under capacity because people aren't paid adequately. They can go to other jurisdictions and make higher wages, have lower cost of living. And you know what? I would like my public safety force to have a high morale. They are working very hard. They are the front line dealing with some of the most vulnerable people in our community in the middle of the night who are having mental health crises. And I'd love to see the morale of our police force raised up.
So to get going, I'm going to use my minute here because this is my expertise here. Yeah, you know, there's the conversation could go on and on. We need more officers. We need to double the navigation team. We need more police cars, better equipment. The truth is that we cannot hire anybody else, right? And nobody wants to work here. We have a $15,000 signing bonus, and nobody wants to take it. We have great benefits. Nobody wants to work here, right? And there's a couple of things that we need to do. To start off, we need a second precinct, right, or a better precinct. And as of right now, the city is using $12 million to renovate the North Precinct. And during those renovations, what they're going to do is they're going to get rid of a park that people are utilizing. They're going to create that into a parking lot, and they're going to put portables in the back of the police department for more space that we cannot fill because we don't have the personnel, right? So we need two precincts. North Seattle is huge, and we have one precinct. We also are having issues with hiring and retention, right? You know, we need to create incentives. What other cities do is that they provide college education for first responders. And this is not only about police officers, this is also about firefighters, social workers, anybody that's helping with the situation of the homelessness crisis that we have, right? So other cities provide education bonuses or pay for education. There's actually studies that show that officers who are educated are less likely to use force, right? So there's a ton of things that we could do. Another example of how we're mismanaging public safety is we have a fleet and services department, right, who purchases our police cars at roughly $30,000, and then they lease that police car to the police department, and we end up paying 4 or 5 times what that police car is worth, right? So that is money that is going to waste that we could utilize for other things. We could utilize it for you know, affordable housing, for addressing the homelessness crisis. You know, there's also a complete disconnect between the community and the police department, right? I could go on and on with stories, but there is completely a misunderstanding between us as a police department and us, because I am also a resident, as to what's going on and what we can do better to improve public safety.
Behavioral health issues is definitely part of the issue. Of course, the opioid epidemic is also contributing to a lot of the crime we're having. My car has been broken in several times. We're all experiencing it. The good thing is that the state is making behavioral health issues a #1 priority right now. They're building a 150-bed behavioral health crisis facility at the University of Washington Medical Center, and there's going to be more money for treatment. I do agree we need 2 precincts. The area is too large, and not only that, the police are also sort of tied down because of the consent decree. So they're having to actually, you know, if they're taking somebody downtown and then that person has, you know, their fingers hurt or something, they have to go all the way back to their precinct. And in Seattle, that's not, it's just a waste of time. It's a very logistical issue. So, and the #1 thing is that we have to support our cops because, you know, I was a business owner and I know how important that is to have a good morale at your company to recruit and retain employees. So that's the biggest thing for me. Thank you.
So our city budget has gone from $4 billion to $6 billion in just a few years. The city of Boston is just about the same size as us. Their budget is $3 billion, and they have 600 more police officers than we have. I would like to see that. That would mean just in our district we could have 100 more cops, which we desperately need. I think we need to have a Ballard police precinct, and we need to have a police precinct in every one of the districts in the North End. South of the Ship Canal, there's one police precinct in every one of the council districts. So per 100,000 people, they each have one. But we have one police precinct for 300,000 people. The response times are terrible. The community policing doesn't work. These are changes that I will make sure happens.
I've been saying since I started this campaign that Seattle Police Department should be the most well-trained, most well-paid police force in the state. And that also means that we get to hold Seattle Police Department accountable to the consent decree and accountable for the highest expectations of professionalism. So when we give them the tools and the resources that they need to do their job, then we can hold them accountable for doing that job well. And that means hiring more police officers. It means investing in the facilities here in the North Precinct and allowing those officers to get back to community policing. Because right now we're asking police officers to be housing specialists and substance abuse counselors and mental health counselors. And it doesn't allow them to get out of their cars and do the work of building relationships in a neighborhood. That requires more resources, it requires more officers. But fundamentally, we can't just look at public safety through the lens of SPD. We have to look at all of the tools available for public safety. That means more outreach workers. It means investing more in social workers, in mental health facilities, in substance abuse facilities, and in places for people who are sleeping unsheltered to come inside. So public safety doesn't have one tool, it has many tools, and we have to use all of them the right way.
I think, do I have a loud night? I do. Hooray! Heidi, your question. The industrial maritime industry is a significant contributor to the state and local economy. What steps would you take to preserve industrial and maritime jobs and land uses in Ballard?
I'd like my extra minute for this. This is extremely important to the identity, the culture, and the economy of Ballard. We've been seeing in other areas where we have industrial district encroachment by other uses, and that's definitely happening here in Ballard. With the Burt Gilman Trail, for an example, I sponsored the resolution to complete the Burt Gilman Trail 16 years ago on the city council on Shilshell Avenue. And since that time, I've learned a lot from the businesses along Shilshell. I learned that Dan Troll moved their business right after that vote because they have very large trucks that come in. They're a fishing net company that sells internationally, and they were really concerned about causing injury or death to anyone along a trail along that area. It's a very major freight corridor. And it's not just that business that would be impacted. There are many businesses along Shilshell that would be impacted. From Salmon Bay Sand and Gravel, which the city's own EIS and their economic impact statements that would be severely impacted by that. There's also Pacific Fishermen Shipyard with many jobs there that would be severely impacted. And there's over 240 parking spaces that we would lose for people who are working along Shilshell, but also shopping along Ballard Avenue and Market Street, who park there for the market on the weekends. So there's some serious impacts, but we need to complete the trail. So I've been talking about an elevated trail, and this is a good place to talk about that because there's one in Copenhagen. And it's, in fact, Eric, who runs this museum has been on it and says that it's an innovative solution. We can have a win-win here instead of polarized interests competing against each other. I think that that's the kind of leadership we need to have in City Hall.
Yeah, as someone who's been here for my whole life, I like to, it's kind of like the marine industrial community in Ballard has been forgotten. I hope people know that the marine industrial community is so important to the economy of not just this district and not just this city, but the entire region. There are thousands of jobs that are good, high, working class, good jobs that are supporting thousands of families in this industry. And I know some people from this industry are here tonight. Thank you for what you do. We have to address freight mobility and respect that. But I'll give you an example. Today, I had the chance of going down to Western Towboat. They were in the newspaper for building those tugboats. This is a company that's been around for 3 decades, since 1948, third generation CEO. Russell showed me around today. They build tugboats, and then they use the boats themselves for marine transport and bringing supplies into communities in Alaska, all over the place. This is a very important part of our community. It's going to be a very important part moving forward with me on the council, and I look forward to it.
I agree with it. I mean, I think it's we're extremely lucky to have the industrial area in our district. I think that it is at a very fragile point, and if we do any, we alter any of that, the way it functions, we have a lot invested there that we could possibly lose. Common sense to me seems bike trail is really the only thing that I can imagine that is has them as concerned, right? And you have one side that thinks that the trail should be completed, and I'm completely in favor of the trail being completed. I just don't think that is the #1 choice. I think that it's become an ego issue at this point with politicians, two different sides who want to push their agenda. And I think that we need to sit down and have this conversation, right? We need to sit down and figure out what is the compromise here. And I don't think that show is the compromise. We need to be working with the Maritime people to find a resolution not only for the bike trail, but how could we sustain the maritime industry long term?
When I came here 25 years ago, Seattle was rated the most livable city in the country. And one of the reasons for that, I think, is because of the unique neighborhoods that Seattle has and the unique businesses that Seattle has. We have Fremont, we have Capitol Hill, we have Ballard, and we have the maritime industry and the Nordic heritage. So that's integral to what we value here. And as we grow, we can't lose that identity, and we can't lose that culture and that feel. We have to grow, and we have to and we can grow. I think we can grow, and we can also retain what makes Seattle so special. And as far as the trail, yeah, the same thing. When I came here 25 years ago, it was an issue then, and it's still an issue. And maybe that's a Seattle process, but I'd like to see a little more compromise when it comes to finding out where the best place the trail should go.
I have a post on my website called The Bin Nick and Me, and it explains in detail how I feel about this topic. The Alaskan fishing fleet feeds the entire nation and beyond. It is not a dying business, it is a thriving business. All of the businesses that are along the ship canal, whether they change to another business, they need to be a business that supports the industrial maritime industry. The city of Seattle has a really negative approach when it comes to industrial land. They want condos and coffee houses from one end of this city to the other. And that is just wrong. They talk about wanting diversity. You know what? That is diversity. That industry makes us a very diverse neighborhood and district with jobs that you can actually support yourself and your family on. So I completely support preserving, enhancing, and probably even expanding maritime industrial land uses in Seattle.
This is a very special industry for Seattle and a very special industry for Ballard, and it's a very special industry for me. So my first job, one of my first jobs, was working at Fisherman's Terminal on the ships that sailed up to Southeast Alaska. And in fact, my first boss in that industry is here tonight. And I have spent more than one occasion, more than one winter day at Hackfish working on those boats. So I feel this very closely because it's a big part of who I am and how I connect back to this neighborhood and Ballard generally. We have to protect the zoning. We have to ensure that we're protecting these businesses. We have to make sure that they can continue to thrive in an environment that's changing around them. And we have to work with those industries, with those business owners to understand what that looks like, what that partnership looks like, because they are good jobs. They're good middle-class jobs, and we want to keep those right here in Ballard. So we want to protect that land use, and we want to help them adapt to the environment that's changing around them.
Before Ballard was popular, and before, we've always had a good economy. And that's because every fishing vessel that's in Fisherman's Terminal is a small business that employs 4 to 10 people directly and hundreds of more indirectly. We have businesses here this is a freshwater port, the closest freshwater port to the Gulf of Alaska. This is an economic advantage like nowhere else in the Northwest. This allows us, as long as there are enough of the facilities for a vessel to come in and receive full maintenance inside of the locks, we have an economic advantage like no one else. And we need to preserve this. As our neighborhood continues to change with additional condos and residential uses, we need to make sure that the maritime industry has the protections, incentives that they deserve, and to continue to be producing the delicious fish that we all eat. I mean, you go anywhere in the world and you will look at a can of salmon that says came from Ballard or Magnolia. I know it's still a show. Thank you.
Okay, next question is Jay.
While I have a mic, I want to remind everyone, all the candidates, you have a extra minute chip you can use one time. Thanks.
Love the fact that when somebody mentions the word Seattle process, that we can laugh. This is Jay's question. Jay, City Council has passed the flurry of landlord-tenant legislation in recent years, including first in line tenant selection, currently being held up in court, and no criminal background checks allowed. What ideas do you have to work with small landlords who have traditionally provided some of the most affordable housing?
It's a great question, thank you, Jean. So I don't know how many of you know that over 50% of the residents in Seattle rent. So that means over 50% of the folks in our city are dependent on a relationship with a landlord. Most of them are dealing with small landlords, and I'm sure there's some of them here tonight. I know I've met with some of you and talked to you on your doorsteps. Seattle has been a leader, and I would say a national leader in protections for tenants. We know that the state legislature has also made some very good strides in the last session, extending the eviction notice period from 3 days to 14 days, because we know that there are a lot of people that are living month to month, and we know that there are a lot of people who are either one medical situation, medical problem, or some other crisis away from not being able to pay their rent, and we don't need to be doing anything that's fueling the homelessness problem. But we also need to make sure we balance that with landlords being educated and also feeling represented on the council and in the city, so there's a nice healthy balance, and everyone knows the rules, and we can continue to function well as a city that has over half the folks renting.
So I'm a renter, I don't know the rules, right? And I think this is extremely complicated. I think what we've created here is that we villainize mom and pop landlords, just like we villainize small business owners and pretend that they're the big corporations where they're not, right? The small and pop landlords are not the developers. They're two completely different things. And I'm confused. You know, I moved out here to North Seattle, and there's all these things in place for people like me, people of color, people who, you know, are not wealthy, people who are renters. And I had a really hard time finding a place. there's a study that came out a couple of months ago, I believe like 5 or 6 months ago that UW did, that showed that 80% of landlords were actually considering selling their property because they could not keep up with all the rules and regulations, right? I think there's a fine line to walk and say, hey, we want to maintain and provide services for people of color, for people of low income, and for your renters, but at the same time, we want to protect the landlords, right? If my grandmother or mother owned an old house, I would want to know who's living in her home, right? We really need to build a better relationship to work with the small landlords in the city.
Well, tenant control is extremely important, especially now with the homeless issue we have, and a lot of people are one paycheck away from losing their homes. And I think the latest state tenant legislation tried to strike a balance with landlords and with tenants, giving them 14 days, but also having a fund for landlords in case there was some problems collecting money. So I think that's what we have to do. We have to have a balancing act. But I think what's also coming down, another issue is rent control in Seattle, whether we will ever have the ability, which I think we should have the ability on city council in the city of Seattle to have rent control, but we really have to learn from other cities like New York City right now, which has had a lot of problems with rent control. And what they've learned, if we're going to have that and we're going to support people with rent control, we have to learn from other cities and San Francisco and what they've done wrong.
I think we're over-regulating the mom and pop landlords tremendously. I don't know about you, but I'm a landlord. I rent to 7 people at my house, and I would never have wanted to bring on the first person that applied for a bunch of reasons. I'm going to use my extra minute, by the way. Here's a really interesting thing that people don't really talk about, but I finally got a form together for when people apply for a room, and my younger son moved out. He was aging in place, but he left. And I got a form together, and 12 people came and filled it out to rent my little $750 room with all-inclusive. Okay. 8 of them made over $10,000 a month. And my heart is not into renting that $750 room to somebody that makes 10 grand a month. I think that we can be fair to everybody without being overly regulating on this. Would you hire the first person that applied for a job? I don't think you would, because you want to do your homework. You want to figure out, is this the right fit? Is this going to work out in the long run? I spend a lot of time speaking to each of these people that moves into my house, and because I do that, they stay. My housemates, 4 or 5 years, they stay with me. So I think it's just like a hire. When you're bringing somebody in as a tenant, you want to make a great choice. And I think it's fine that that you don't have to check the box that you have a criminal record, but that doesn't deny any landlord the right to do a background check on someone. So if you're interested in doing that, you can still go ahead and do that, but at least the person's not going to be turned away right at that moment. Thank you.
These policies came about because there was demonstrated bias in landlords and leasing agents and how they were picking folks to live in those spaces. So I think that we have to have a conversation about how do we treat small landlords and large landlords differently and what sorts of regulations are appropriate. But I don't think we can miss in that there was a real problem we were trying to solve there, which is that it's harder for people in marginalized communities and people of color to get access, equitable access to affordable or low-income housing. So they're rooted in something that's quite serious. When it comes to generally how we treat these landlords, whether it's a large developer who owns 5,000 units or a small individual who owns 2 or 3 units, there's a lot of good reasons why we want to have a different set of regulations for those folks, right down to just the cumbersome trying to comply with those regulations and how that can really put a small one-unit landlord out of business. But we always have to focus that conversation through the lens of race and equity and how that shows up in Seattle's housing policies historically and today.
You nailed it. I mean, absolutely. The first in line addresses marginalized communities and people who don't necessarily look like the landlord or may have had a run-in with the law at some point in their life, which may have been a product of being part of a marginalized community. And these are things that we need to keep in place and protect for our community members. What I can tell you is, as a renter, having rented all over District 6, 2 different places in Ballard, Upper Fremont, and Green Lake, is that I know the difference between a local, hometown, small landlord who owns either 1 or 2 places, and the difference between a rental management company where I'm currently renting, which used to be a Section 8 apartment building and is now renting, I'm not even going to tell you how much because it will take the air out of this room. What I can tell you is that there is a difference between the small mom and pop shops and the big companies. We need to be able to be flexible for the good actors who are keeping lower rents in our community in an organic way and protect our community members. Thank you.
Yes, people are concerned when you hear the statistics that about half the people in our community are renters, and 47% of renters are spending over 30% of their income on housing. So much more than what they're spending on food or healthcare or childcare, and it's severely straining to a lot of families, and they are very, some crisis away, losing a job, healthcare crisis, from losing their housing, which is very devastating to families and to children especially. So I can understand where this is coming from. The Women's Commission commissioned a study to find out how do we keep people housed, and found that the average amount that someone owes for when they are evicted is $1,200. That's it. That's how close they are to homelessness. We need to invest more in rate stabilization because those landlords do need to make their mortgage payments, so that we need to be increasing the rent stabilization fund.
Here we go. This is Sergio's question first. In 2014, voters approved the Seattle Park District, creating a special taxing district to maintain and improve parks, boulevards, and recreational facilities, with City Council serving as the governing board. Has the board been doing a fair and equitable job for all Seattleites, and what is your vision for overseeing the Seattle parks?
So I think this is a huge one, right? We're talking about they've done a good job. I don't know about you folks, but we can't even utilize our parks right now, right? I mean, they're filled with feces, human feces, they're filled with needles. They're unsafe, right? As a police officer, I don't feel safe to utilize these parks. So have they done a good job? I mean, it's good that they've brought up the conversation, but I think that public safety is a huge one for these parks, right? I think that we need to take these parks back, and we need to utilize them for, right? I mean, Ballard Commons Park, it's a mess. It's a complete mess, and it's a place where we should be able to go and enjoy, time with our kids, or we should be able to walk our parks, right? And I'm not saying, hey, let's criminalize these people for whatever reason is that they're hanging on these parks or living in these parks, but we need to have before we can start focusing on whether we're doing a good job with the parks or not, we should be able to use our parks, right? And we're not. I mean, I went to a barbecue 10 days ago where we got kicked out by people who were living in the park, in Woodland Zoo Park, right? So again, I think we need to do a better job in giving us the option to utilize these parks before we can even talk about whether our budget or our finances are doing good.
Well, that's a complicated issue again because it ties in homelessness and where people can go and whether they can stay in our parks and whether they can actually or stay on our sidewalks. And I agree with the city, and I agree what they're doing right now, where they're having to move people away, and that people should not be on sidewalks and should not be in our parks if they're homeless, and they shouldn't be living there. But at the same time, we need to have someplace that they can legally stay. And at a minimum, we have to have a place where they can even tent. Because if we don't have the housing for them, then we're just moving them around. And I know that wasn't the question, I'm sorry, I'm switching on you. But as far as parks, I believe we should have at least one dog park in every urban village. That's what I'm running on.
I was very worried about the Metropolitan Parks District when we passed it. It's a lot the way I felt about the Sound Transit. It was too much without enough check-in with the citizens. And now that's come to roost. So I'm very, very much a parks supporter, but I'm worried about the direction that we went, and I'm worried about our parks for the same reason that my colleagues have mentioned. Ballard Commons Park is a complete embarrassment when people feel like they can't use it because of filth and needles. My family has made a habit of going to Golden Gardens on the 4th of July, and we have a big extended family. We set it up. Last year was a complete zoo down there. So I think we have work to do to make these important parks that we have that are regional work, but I think that we've got to clamp down on the Metropolitan Parks District and make it responsive to the citizens of Seattle.
I feel like my beagle puppy, Patsy Klein, would appreciate John Lisbon's answer about one dog park per district. The question about the Parks District specifically goes to a deeper question around people not feeling like they have a sense of where the resources that are being dedicated are actually going. And it's a really solvable problem, right? Because of the tools that we have today through technology, we can make transparency and oversight and accountability something that's in the hands of everybody in this room. You should not have to read a 50-page or a 250-page report to understand where the money's going, right? That is something that can be available to you on a quick dashboard on your smartphone. And companies based in Seattle pioneered this technology. So you can see where the money's going, and you can hold elected officials accountable. So it's true about the Parks District, it's true about Sound Transit, it's true about the homelessness response. The city can do a better job and must do a better job of putting the information around where we spend money and where those resources are going into the hands of people whose taxes they are spending.
Again, regarding homelessness, I want to create an opportunity with 4 walls and a door that locks for everyone to come inside so that we don't have to continue to have this conversation while the question was about the Metropolitan Parks District and the oversight by City Council. I do want to touch on the 3 different bodies. There's the Seattle Parks Foundation, Seattle Metropolitan Parks District, and then the Seattle Parks Department. And there's also additional King County Parks Levy. And so I think that it's really important that we have additional accountability and oversight over the dollars that are in each of these entities, because I can tell you Smith Cove Park, while it's outside of our district here in District 6, was line items to have funding and to already be built as a park that we can enjoy, and it still remains a construction site. I want to make sure that these parks are built, the dollars are used efficiently, we stop studying the problems and get to building.
We need to protect the parks we have. Believe it or not, they're under threat by the Seattle City Council, now doing a study whether we should protect our public golf courses now. You probably saw Danny Westmead's article today that Seattle has only 12.5% park space. Las Vegas is doing better than we are. Ooh. I mean, we need to be doing more to increase opportunities for people to get outdoors and have a variety of recreational activities in the city. That's what a city needs, especially a city that's getting more dense. We need to have those kind of outlets. And hats off to the Ballard Pea Patch people who are here, right? Let's save the Ballard Pea Patch, right? We need these kind of green spaces in our community. The end.
Well, I'm not going to speak to the overall administrative performance of these governing bodies, but I will say as someone who's grown up enjoying Seattle's parks and taking as a kid and now having my own children enjoy them and dogs over the years, and it is definitely true, we actually have a limited amount of parks and green space. I've heard the same thing that's already been alluded to. People are saying, I thought my tax dollars are paying for things like parks. And I don't feel safe going to the parks now, and I can't go to the parks because of, we all know it. So that just has to end. That's not the solution. Using the parks as emergency shelters, we can do a lot better, and we will.
John, this is your question first. How would you work with businesses to make them feel welcome in the city and incentivize themselves to bring their resources to bear on important social issues?
Well, as a small business owner, I have, and as an entrepreneur, I definitely care. I'm a capitalist myself. So I think what's happening right now, and we saw just today that Amazon and Microsoft donated about $38 million towards permanent supportive housing, or $43 million. And I think that's great. I also, it's not as much as the head tax would have given us, but I think it's, as an entrepreneur and as a business person, I think it's really important that the council actually works more collaboratively with the major businesses and the major stakeholders in our city. And I would do that as your city council member. I know I would be able to encourage more community participation from our major businesses in Seattle.
I'm a small business owner and have been for 30 years. I like to say that businesses make paychecks. And so I feel that I'm often feeling like the businesses are demonized. And again, it goes back to what we were talking about on the last issue. There's small business and there's big business, but you can't treat them all the same. We've gotten some laws together in Seattle that have really punished, for instance, restaurant owners or with like the sweetened beverage tax that doesn't exist outside of the city, and so it punishes within the city. This is kind of part of the bigger picture of us not doing regional things, but doing one-offs that wind up really hurting businesses. Right now, without having the 600 cops that we should have, we've privatized security. All of the businesses are paying out the ear to be able to keep their businesses running. We've got to do better to support businesses, especially small businesses in Seattle.
I've been leading a small business in downtown Seattle for the last 4 years that does travel and tourism. So our job is to market this as a destination. And it's a small company, and I've seen firsthand how difficult it is for small businesses to thrive in Seattle. So we have to give small businesses the space and the support to really begin in those new ventures. And that means things like affordable space for small businesses. But for all business, we have to also understand that they have a role to play in building healthy, vibrant communities, and that means giving back to those communities. Now, how we do that is what's really critical here, because we're not going to get what we want by standing on the steps of City Hall and beating big business over the head. It's just not going to work. I was raised with the more bees with honey sort of mantra. So we can reach out and build relationships with small businesses and big businesses and bring them to the table and find out what's important to them and what moves them and what their stake in it is, and bring them around to why having a healthy, vibrant community is good business, whether you're a small business or you're a big business.
It's the small businesses that really make our city's character, our neighborhood's character really thrive. I can't tell you, actually it's only been 3 times that I've helped Dave Voorhees at Bob Street Records move his records. And I can tell you, he's got a lot of records. So many records that you can't even see them all, they're in storage. We now have a new Director of Economic Development here in the city of Seattle, a gentleman by the name of Bobby Lee. And 9 years ago, I worked with Bobby Lee in the Oregon State Legislature. And so when I talk about relationships, being at different levels of government, being throughout my entire career, being able to work to get things done for small businesses and for businesses throughout the city, this is one of those small opportunities that Bobby's got some really creative and really innovative ideas that I'm not going to steal his thunder and share with you tonight, but just to say that we need to create the small business support networks beyond just advertising and making sure that the streets are clean. And I want to start a Ballard brewery district and make that a formalized entity.
I'm a small business owner, and I think that business is really important. It's vital to our community. It's us. It provides vitality, innovation, jobs in our community. I think we frequent small businesses a lot, and we enjoy that, right? So I think it's really important that we engage with business in a collaborative and constructive way. I think it's a false dichotomy to say that it's neighborhoods versus businesses, because I think neighborhood businesses are a really important component to what makes a city vibrant and interesting. I also, as an employer, we have 65 employees at my company. It's also, what matters to all of us as residents also matters to small business owners. We need to have more affordable housing for the people who are working in our businesses, to be able to live close to where they work. We need better mobility in our community. We need to prioritize public safety. What affects small businesses also affects the rest of our community.
One of the reasons Seattle has an economy right now that is the envy of the nation is because of the small businesses. And I appreciate the work that all the small businesses in our city do, and I know there's many small business owners here tonight. Thank you. It is just one of the coolest things about Seattle and our district, whether it's Crown Hill, Whittier Heights now with these new businesses that are coming out, Pickett, Fremont, down here. It's so cool. Cleaners, retail, coffee shops. This is the backbone of the community. And I want to call out the Ballard Alliance. I think the Ballard Alliance is a shining example of how businesses coming together can do amazingly good things for the community. Not just in their promotional activities, but addressing public safety and addressing social responsibility. Obviously, we need to address affordable housing, so small business owners can afford to continue to work here, and the employees can continue to work here, and the transportation issues, as we've already discussed, they're all related. But I look forward to being a champion for small businesses across the city, and particularly in District 6 on council.
So I deal with business owners absolutely every day. I think small business owners are the poster child of everything that's going wrong in Seattle, right? I mean, they deal with parking, they deal with affordability, they're dealing with hiring employees that can live in the city, they're dealing with crime, they're dealing with homelessness, they're dealing with absolutely everything, right? And when I talk to business owners, if you guys haven't walked down Ballard or Fremont, posters and every other business, I appreciate that. And the connection that I've been able to build with the business owners is really what's propelled me to get involved into this stage, right? And I can tell you their complaints are, we can't keep up with crime, we can't keep up with hiring anybody because they can't afford to live in the city. They can't, they don't want to be stuck in traffic driving from Everett or from wherever they're driving. Transportation is a huge one, right? They don't have the public transportation. And they also feel, just like you guys don't feel, you folks don't feel like you're being represented, they feel like they're not being represented by the city, right? It seems like, going back to the earlier comment I made, City Hall demonizes the small business, right? It treats them like a big corporation, and they are not, right? And this is the reason why we live here, because of the vibrant small business, because of the communities, and I think we need to do a better job to work with small business owners to address this issue.
Thank you. Kate, this is your question. Describe one or more piece of existing or proposed city legislation that you would like to revise or repeal during your first year in office.
Thank you, there's a lot of them. I mentioned some of the ones that I'm interested in changing. I'm definitely interested in getting rid of that sweetened beverage tax. That is just an embarrassment. I'm really worried about this ADU legislation. I put 6 amendments on my website. I'm not super hopeful that we're going to get the owner occupancy requirement for the ADUs. So I'd be really interested in getting that in there once I'm elected. I know that there's a lot of people running in the other districts that feel the same. I think that we can achieve that. Mostly what I'm interested in doing is listening to, just like we're here tonight, forums, people saying, well, this law is not working for me, this one's not working, it could be tweaked to do that, and then let's do it instead of continuously punishing businesses and homeowners with legislation that just simply does not make sense.
The legislation I'm really interested in is legislation that's going to work to build a larger supply of low-income and middle-income housing that's going to work to bring density to our communities so that we can ensure that people get to stay in the communities that they live in. So when I look at the current legislation that's being considered around ADUs and DADUs, I'd like to see that pushed a bit further to include into that duplexes, which provide a really stable supply of middle-income housing for families who are trying to live and work in this district right now and can't afford to. This duplex and triplex push will ensure that we reduce the displacement that we hear about and that we've all been talking about tonight, and it's going to help with our homelessness crisis. So I'll say again that the way out of homelessness is by increasing the supply of low-income and middle-income housing, and that means creating more dense, more livable neighborhoods. So I look at that through the lens of equity as well, and that is really the lens that every piece of legislation should be assessed through. Is what is it doing for equity, what is it doing for climate change, and what is it doing to make a more livable and affordable city?
I've got several of them. Mandatory housing affordability. We need to have more affordable housing units tied to upzoning, and we need to have them built within the district in which the in lieu fees were generated from. As far as the tree ordinance, I'm currently working on the tree ordinance. I would love to see. I see the pathway forward for that. It's going to be not done this year. And we need to have larger tree canopies so that we reduce the temperatures on our, we need more trees, we need more canopy, I can get that done. Fresh Bucks, we need to expand the Fresh Bucks program so that we can have additional access to fresh foods and support our farmers markets. We also need to expand the utility discount program to ensure that people who are on fixed incomes or low income can have a little bit of reprieve from the increasing property taxes that we're experiencing in the city. Thank you.
I think the city should look at what happens with the accessory dwelling unit legislation regarding owner occupancy and tweak that and change that if any of the risks or fears come to light. I think that we should bring back neighborhood planning. When I was on the council 20 years ago, urban planning was bottom up. Neighborhoods were asked, please, this is how many units you need to take. You decide where they go and what amenities they need to go with it. That's why we got Ballard Commons, and it's a tragedy that we don't get to use it because Ballard has accepted so much growth, and yet we need a more welcoming Ballard Commons to be part of that amenity of air and light and recreation to go with it. On the Burke-Gilman Trail, that needs to be changed. We need to protect the industrial and maritime businesses along Shoal with an elevated trail. And with mandatory housing affordability, rather than have affordable housing put into an in lieu fund to go somewhere else, how about affordable housing in our communities on site?
Well, to speak briefly to a specific policy that's tangible that I'd like to see changed, kind of touched on it a little bit. If we look at homelessness right now as a proxy indicator or a symptom, using a clinical term, of a lot of problems that we're facing in our rapidly growing city, and managing that growth is one of the most important things we can do. And it is an indicator. Unaffordable housing is one of the biggest issues and one of the biggest drivers, rising rents, etc. So I'm learning that land use and zoning and those housing regulations, it rivals biochemistry in medical school to me. It is so complicated, and there are many, many oversimplifications that when I peel it back, it's more complicated than it really looks. I look forward to tackling those issues. So it's something that's tangible. I would like to see, as far as that end spectrum of unaffordable housing and homelessness, what we're dealing with now, we need to see more of an investment in those programs I mentioned, like the mobile crisis teams and the LEAD program. Because we know they work, we know they take people out of the cycle of short time in jail, back out on the streets. They need the help, and it addresses the social services they need and the mental health treatment that they need.
I think the question here is what will we bring back to the table to change, right? And I think that we can spend another 4 years discussing what changes we need to make, what things that we've already improved, right? Whatever you want to focus on is accountability, right? And I think that we need to do a better job with our spending. I think we need to do a better job with including the residents, business owners, and absolutely everybody in the district on making decisions for what's best for the district, right? I think the number one thing I'm hearing right now when I knock on doors is, hey, we feel like MHA is a good thing, but we didn't have enough input, right? How about including everybody else moving forward, being a little bit more inclusive, being a little bit more fiscally responsible, right? When we're spending $83,000 per person on homelessness, it's a huge issue, right? We need better services. We need a mental intake facility. We need more policing. We need, better culture. We need more diversity. There's a ton of things that we need, but if we focus in the past, we're going to stay here for another 4 years and continue having this conversation, which we've had. Moving forward is what I'm focusing on. What can we do moving forward to make better decisions and be more responsible with our money?
I'm going to take the extra minute shift on this one. I'm probably going to be predictable because as president of Seattle Fair Growth, we built the coalition that appealed mandatory housing affordability, environmental impact study. And there were several reasons why we did that. One, the fees that developers are having to pay, which are anywhere from 3 to 11% when they're building new buildings, they're getting up zones in replace, and they're supposed to be building affordable housing in exchange for those up zones. And that makes complete sense if it was a process that wasn't skewed towards developers. So they're getting away with like 3 to 11% of the cost of affordable when they build new buildings, which pales in comparison to other cities, which are anywhere from, they have to pay 15 to 25%. And as several members here said, they're allowed to just pay in lieu fees and can build the housing anywhere throughout Seattle, most likely where land is cheap. And it's just going to create more resegregation of vulnerable communities because that housing is going to be built where land is cheap. Also, in the goals of affordable housing, there was, I think, 3,000 affordable homes was the goal from MHA. But they're not including the fact that all the houses that are being demolished, especially the older affordable housing, that's not being included in that goal. So, and I can't understand why that wouldn't be. So as city council member, I want to represent the residents of Seattle. I don't want to represent special interests. And I think instead what we have to do is bring back the growth-related housing fund, which the city had, which used a percentage of the incremental increase in property taxes towards affordable housing. We have to build affordable housing directly. There are other things we can do, like retaining sales tax, which the city just allowed, which the state just allowed cities to do. So we can retain sales tax, and those funds can be bondable, and we can build affordable housing that way.
Thank you so much. This is our last question, and we're going to give you just a little bit more time. You've been efficient enough so that we can afford to do that. So you're going to have 90 seconds for this last question. This is your reward. What is this, Terry? This is you going first. What is your one great idea that you would advocate for if elected? And why are you the best person for this job?
idea. It's a set of great ideas, and they're not mine. But I like to copy from people who are smarter than me. So I started tonight by saying that we are in a climate crisis, and that when we look at every policy that we enact throughout the city, we have to look at it through the lens of climate change. When we think about homelessness and how that relates to housing affordability, we need to be building dense housing. When we think about how we can improve our transportation and traffic, we need to be talking about climate change there. So I would look to Portland, our smaller and almost a school neighbor to the south, because they have a 174-point climate action plan that they have enacted. And as Portland has grown its population, grown the number of jobs, they have reduced their emissions year over year. Seattle continues to miss its emissions targets. So we need to take that 174-point plan and bring it here to Seattle, because we have to do more about this issue. What I will do is make sure that through the hustle and bustle of city government, and when everything feels like a crisis, that we aren't missing the fact that there are real crisis moments happening today, and that we have 20 years to really do something about our carbon emissions if we are going to stave off the worst of it. So I will never let this issue not be front and center. I will never let this issue not be something that is in the equation as we think about how we're going to use land, street space, and government resources.
What is the first thing, the first thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna open the district office here in Ballard. I know how City Hall works. I've been there long enough to know where the roadblocks are. I'm not there long enough to have caused them. I know where the opportunities are that we can work to make progress happen and to have density that is reflective of our community while we preserve and promote and protect our maritime community. Being here in district is very important to me. While at the same time balancing the needs across the city. Because again, much like the Metropolitan Park District conversation, we need to make sure that, yes, our district is getting a park, but also the districts in South Seattle and West Seattle are getting their parks as well. I think if there's going to be one policy that I start with, it's going to be transit-only lanes and working to ensure that you can just go to your bus stop and within 10 minutes you can get on your bus, get where you're going, and not get stuck in traffic, so that we don't have to rely on our cars. We keep being told that new buildings can be built without parking because you don't have to rely on your car, and yet we're not provided the service to be able to get around town that we need. And so I think for me, that's my first thing. I'm going to go after the tree ordinance as soon as possible because we definitely need to protect our trees. Thank you.
I have served on the board for Climate Solutions for over a decade and for Conservation Northwest, and by far one of the most urgent issues facing humanity is climate change. And when you consider what's happening in our nation's capital, you may feel discouraged. But at the local level, there's a lot we can do about it. And when I was on the city council, I was the climate protection champion. And that's a big part of the reason why we have no net emissions of greenhouse gases at Seattle Seattleites. We divested from the Centralia coal plant. We invested in wind power, the largest public utility in the nation at that time to do that. I wanted to invest in solar power, but it was prohibitively expensive at that time, so I created the Green Power Program. And you are voluntarily able to add money to your electricity bill, if you choose to go to solar installations on public buildings in our community. So what's left? What do we need to do? It's all about transportation and where we live relative to where we need to go. In fact, 50% of our carbon footprint is passenger vehicles. So the way we get around that is that we do need to double down on providing more housing opportunities, and that also gets at housing affordability. And I think in order to do that, we need to have meaningful engagement of our communities through neighborhood planning. And I'd like to bring that back. Thanks.
Well, I think everybody knows that's a great and difficult, challenging question. Everybody knows that we have some great challenges facing us here in Seattle. We've talked about most of them tonight. Income inequality, affordable housing, the rising gap between the haves and the have-nots, climate change, transportation, the homelessness issue. But the one big idea I would like to bring to City Hall is, how about this? How about working together? I don't understand how this city, where we've got to the point where it is so binary. I don't agree with you, so you're my enemy. That's not how things get done. We have to sit down and be civil, and we need to be able to come together, and we should be a city that has amazing, and already does have amazing progressive values, and that is part of our soul in this city, being compassionate, progressive people, and still be able to bring folks, whether it's from nonprofits, advocacy groups, labor, businesses, big and small, faith-based groups, veterans groups, and every group that has a stake in it, and sit and talk and figure things out. We're not always going to agree, but we can definitely work together and move things forward. And I'm stunned when I'm meeting with folks across the city in the last 6 months here, and people say, well, if you're not in City Hall, when would you come to us with an idea that was going to impact our group? And I say, how about the beginning? Has that not been happening? And they say, no, it's not. This is getting pushed down from the top down. That is not the way we want things in Seattle. We want it coming from grassroots levels up, and I think we can do a lot better job working together to solve a lot of these very complex problems that we have, and I'm confident we can do it.
The question is what the number one thing I would do, and why am I the candidate, right? I think that the number one thing I would do is just my approach, right? There's so many things that need to be addressed. We talk about climate change. If you ask me what's the number one issue we face as humanity, it is climate change. But I find it hard to cope with when we're getting dispatched to 14th and Show because people are dumping their needles, feces buckets, and the lime bites into the water, and we're doing absolutely nothing about it while we're speaking about climate change, right? I think that we need to keep it to a local. I'm running for local office, and it's a local approach to represent you, and if that includes climate change, let's address it on a local level. That's really my philosophy here. It's just, hey, I have an interesting perspective on what's going on. I deal with these issues. I'm stuck in traffic for 9 hours a day. I deal with homeless people for 9 hours a day. I don't have money to pay high rents. I'm a renter. I'm a person of color. All these issues I deal with, right? And I bring it from a very hands-on approach, right? A very pragmatic approach where I don't sit in an office and I'm not a policy wonk. I'm a very practical person. And I think we do a lot of talking in Seattle, right? Very educated people, but we need to be practical. Let's get it done. Let's get it done. We talk about how we care about the homeless. Let's get it done. Let's give them somewhere they could go, somewhere safe, where they're not dying in the streets, right? When we get dispatched 9 times in one day because people are having overdoses and encampments, that is a problem, right? So let's actually do action. Let's sit down, let's have the tough conversations, and let's start resolving these issues.
Well, the first brilliant thing I'm going to do is actually get to know my fellow city council members, because I think it's something that collaborating with our other city council members is really important, because I worked in a small business. I was the owner of a small business. I was in the goal management team, and we're all working together. We're all trying to get the same goals accomplished. And I can't imagine working in a group where you're divisive and you're not collaborating, because we have so many issues to deal with. They're mentioned here, the combination of homelessness, housing affordability, and all those interrelated issues, drug abuse, and we have to work together on the city council to face those issues. And I think what I'm most qualified, why I feel I'm uniquely qualified is I'm a successful entrepreneur. So I think I can deal with coming up with solutions to those issues, but also because I've built collaborative relationships, and I'm not just a dreamer, I'm a doer. And I've actually been doing it. I've been out there in the community the last 5 years, working on improving our lives and our community through Seattle Fair Growth. And another thing that I would like to do, maybe the second thing, would be impact fees, because I have 10 seconds left, which would help bring back some of the livability as we grow, so that growth pays for growth for parks, for schools, and for fire safety, and all the things that we need, but we can't pay for. So that as we grow, we need to have a mechanism in place to do that.
So as a planner and a designer, I have made a career out of solving problems. With win-win solutions, I will never, ever run out of ideas. I've got a process that applies just as well to creating policy and legislation as it does to anything else I've designed. There's two ideas that I'd like to talk to you real quickly about. One of them is, I already told you, I really believe in home ownership and deep-rooted communities. So I'd like to see us increase home ownership from like 47% to maybe 75%. I'd like to offer zero-interest loans to homeowners so that they can tuck these little housing units in, and we can get, homeowners provide the most affordable rentals in the city. So I think getting the rentals onto the site that you own makes perfect sense. The other idea that I want to talk to you about, I call fair is fair healthcare. And what I would like to do is open up the City of Seattle's self-insured healthcare pool to anyone who wants to buy in, who lives or works in the City of Seattle. We could do this. Right now there's 28,000 people in the pool, 14,000 employees and kids and their spouses. We could increase that to 100,000, 200,000 people. And this is what we get. A Cadillac healthcare plan for super cheap. If we could get it down to about $2.25 an hour for a worker to have a Cadillac healthcare plan. So that is one of the big important ideas that I intend to bring forward when elected.
Wow. That concludes our question and answers. First of all, I'd like to thank the candidates for coming. And if you want to go on a nice round of applause. And then I certainly think our moderator, Jean Godden, deserves a nice round of applause. The program tonight is being recorded. You might have noticed over here on the stage left. It will be posted, I've heard, maybe later this evening or maybe not till tomorrow, but if you didn't get a chance to take notes and you want to hear more about if you want to go back and watch it again, it should be available to do that. Also, it's not possible, as you can imagine, to get everything out of the candidates on all their positions in one 2-hour form. So I suggest that you check their websites for one thing, and then I think there's at least a couple more candidate forms scheduled, so you could probably find out about that on their websites as well. I'd invite you to stay around for a few minutes and mingle with each other, mingle with the candidates, those that can stay. I would appreciate it if you could stay a little bit. Maybe you can get some of your specific questions answered, some of your concerns addressed. Reminder, the next meeting of the District Council is going to be July the 10th, and we'll be back at the Sunset Hill Community Association building. And check our website, ballarddistrict.org, for the agenda. Thank you everyone for coming. It's a great turnout. And if those of you that are able, we will appreciate some help stacking chairs. That was our commitment to the museum. And again, thanks to the museum for letting us use the place. Thank you.